Hello everyone, this is ELENA GEORGIou. Welcome to my channel that brings you the latest news worldwide regarding abuse and trauma recovery. So if you want to be my guest, I will be happy to welcome you to my channel. Today we have a special guest and his name is David. It's a pleasure to have you, David, here. Welcome to my show.
All right, thank you, Elena. Yeah, I know. I'm really excited to have this conversation this morning.
So tell us from where you're coming, share your journey, what happened to you, and then you turned out to be someone else and doing great work out in the world, inspiring people, and you have a project. And I want you to share this with our viewers.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, well, it's it's when you look back at at the path that you've walked, it's sometimes it's a little bit unbelievable, right? The fact that you've gotten here, because I know at moments in a lot of people's lives, they don't think tomorrow is ever going to they don't think tomorrow is ever going to show up, or they don't know if they want to be here tomorrow. And I know I've had lots of those conversations over the years inside my own head. And it was interesting because when I look back, I'm a part of a very big family, so there was six of us at home at one time. And my parents, like so many, like they're just humans, and they were struggling. And my mother was 16 when she had her first child, and but I think she, from the stories from stories I've gotten, I believe she was molested and raped by her uncle, and she went through lots of, and so that just set her off on a terrible trajectory through the course of her life. And she well, she had six of us, right, six children, and she wasn't present. And I remember periods of time where my 11-year-old brother, he was the adult of the family, and he would look after us while she left, and she would be gone for 2 or 3 days. So and I resented her for a long time until I really began to, as I got older, I began to understand that, I mean, she just really had no foundation to build on. She was just what's the expression? Hurt people hurt people. She really just had nothing. She really just couldn't. She couldn't find her way through life, and unfortunately, she never did. And my father was interesting. He was the opposite. He was extremely hard worker, but he was dutiful, but he was very angry, and he was a very big man. Like yeah, I'm 6 feet tall, and I come up to his shoulder. So he was a very big, angry man. And so we had a mother that was absent and a father we were afraid of. And so by the time I was 8 years old, I had started leaving home. And by the time I was 13, I had made a break. And so I disappeared for 2 years out on the street. Now, the interesting thing about, when when you go into that environment, that you leave one bad environment for almost a worse environment. Because what do you have on the street for young people? It's the street is full of predators. And so I had to go through that process of actually making my way through the world and trying to navigate through the predators everywhere you met. And it was, and I think at some point you learned how to numb it out, right? You learn how to numb out the sexual abuse. And I remember disappearing inside my head because I didn't want to be in my body. I just disappeared inside my mind. And it was interesting. I kind of bounced around. I mean, I started using drugs when I was 13. I started smoking tobacco when I was 13. And, I just kind of bounced around the planet. I was in California for a while. I lived all across Canada. And I had the chance to actually go to Portugal when I was in my 20s. And I was right on the height of my cocaine use, because back in the 80s, cocaine was cool, right? It wasn't seen as it is. Everybody had Coke spoons. People had the long fingernails. And it was trendy. And so, but I just started learning how to freebase cocaine, how to cook it, just before I ended up before I had the chance to go to Portugal. So and actually going to Portugal saved my life. I really did, because it got me away from the insanity of the resort life. I was living in a ski resort, so lots of money, lots of drugs, lots of parties, lots of chaos. And I ended up in a fishing village in the south of Portugal called Praia de Luz. Maybe 300 people off season, and it forced me to slow down. It just took my lifestyle and just cut it in half. And what was really interesting is that what I come to really love about being in Portugal and some of the older countries I had a chance to travel the time that I was there is I found a rhythm. I found a rhythm to life. I found traditions. I found this really beautiful sense of harmony inside the country. And but I remember sitting on the beach one day, and a moment of sobriety, and I had this kind of I don't know, so somebody once said that somebody was praying for, they must have been praying for me, because this voice said basically, and I still don't know where it came from, that said, because your life was all about you, because you really accomplished nothing, that when you disappear, when you leave this earth, nobody will know, nobody will care. Because my life was all about me. It was about my suffering, what I went through, my problems, my trauma. And it was, I mean, but it was all true. I mean, all that stuff did happen. But I made it all about me. And it was, well, it was killing me, right? It was ruining my life. And so I had the chance to move back to Canada when I was 28. And that's when I began my life, right? I started my life at 28. And so I reconnected with my father, who I've been estranged from for many, many years. And I started working in natural health care. And I started, I became a chartered herbalist. I started working in that industry, and I started rebuilding my health because I've been on the go since I was 13. So you figure that, about 15 years of smoking and drinking and drug use and terrible food consumption, the body's not going to be too happy. And I spent 3.5 years in my father's clinic doing my internship, and then I got into the world of fitness. And so the pendulum kind of swung hard from one side to the other, from not caring at all and being totally unhealthy to being obsessed with health. But was over the years I ended up owning my own practice, and I did a lot of orthopedic rehabilitation. So basically, somebody would get a surgery and they'd have a brand new shoulder joint or a new hip joint or back surgery, or an athlete trying to get better. So I had this practice of 14 years, and it was something I was really good at. It's something that I really had a passion for, because I discovered my body, I discovered strength, I discovered a clear mind, right? I discovered health. And nothing, they say, no drink or no drug will ever feel good as a healthy body. But it was interesting as I was working with injury. What I began to kind of discover or begin to see as a bit of pattern, I realized that the language surrounding physical injuries and the language surrounding emotional injuries is the same language. It's the same wording. And I thought about that for years. I go, is it a coincidence? I mean, we talk about being guarded, right? Well, if you go through emotional trauma, right, sexual abuse, you become very guarded, right? And so, but when I have a neck injury, my muscles guard the injury, right? They become guarded. So the same word. If I dislocate my shoulder, there's something called an apprehension sign, right? So it's fear. So, but I can have apprehension when I'm in a relationship. I can apprehension when being in a large crowd of people, right? I can. So it was the same language, avoidance, weakness, fear, apprehension, guarded, and I wondered, well, if it's the same language, is it the same pattern? Like, does it show up inside the body? Aside from what happened, right, the physical or the emotional trauma, aside from the actual injury, do we respond the same way? And so I got involved in neuroscience. I became very fascinated by all this stuff. I was trying to solve it for myself, but I knew that every time I solved a problem for me, I could solve it for 20,000 people, right? And I know you feel the same way. Once you figure something out, you bring yourself into the light. You get yourself over this hurdle, and you're going, wow, okay, that was so interesting. And then you give the people behind you the information saying, this is how I did it. Maybe this will work for you. So what interesting comparison is that, when I was playing with these two ideas, physical injury, emotional injury, potentially the same reaction from my nervous system. And so how did I do so well in actually helping people overcome physical trauma, right? Through surgery or just through basic injury. And so what I did in my work is that I spent 80% of my time developing core strength, posture, and alignment. That was almost all my work. 20% of the effort was with a problem, but I never worked on the problem first. I worked on the core strength. So if you had a knee injury and you had surgery, so the doctor, the surgeon would send the person to me saying, this person had surgery 12 weeks ago. I want you to make them stronger. And I would, but I didn't work on the problem, which we look at the knee. I went upstream. I said, okay, if you have a knee injury, maybe your core is weak. So yeah, so let's make your core stronger. Let's work on better posture. And so by fixing somebody's posture, and 80% of the effort there, I could generally remove the vast majority. I could remove the vast majority of the weakness that they had around the injury. Right. So what everybody people wanted to lose weight, people wanted to overcome an injury, people wanted to run faster, people wanted to be better at tennis, they wanted a better golf game. The first place I'd always go is I'd make them congruent. I'd work on posture, I'd work on core strength for every single person. And I wouldn't work with them if they didn't let me do that first. So people thought it was kind of strange because people just wanted to go, people want to do what they want to do. And so, well, here's the interesting thing about the idea of a physical core. When I look at the emotional side of it, it was the same question, right? So somebody who's not doing well physically, they're fragmented, meaning that they have no control of their body. Their right arm, their left arm are doing different things. Their hips are all out of whack. They have weaknesses and strengths. The body is so incongruent and so weak and tight that you just can't do anything with it until you bring it back to neutral, bring it back to ground the body in some neutral position, and then you can build out that foundation. You think about a baby, right? If you ever watch children learn how to walk, they're lying on their back, arms and legs are moving, which is basically they're doing Pilates, right? Arms and legs are moving. They're teaching their spine how to interact with their limbs. They go through a whole set of reflexes to, of course, teach them how to roll over, how to lift their head, how to climb up and stand, and then, of course, how to eventually learn how to walk and run. And so that process is built into us. And so I knew there was an innate pattern of reflexes that if I took people back to that process, I could get them walking properly. I could get them moving properly, and because it's built into who we are. So I had the same idea around what about our emotional self? Like, so what is the core of that? And I'm a North American, so I live in a very young country with no real culture. We say we have a North American culture. We don't really. I mean, if I live in Greece, I have a culture, and I can track that culture back 2,500 years or 3,000 years, right? I can go, so that's a culture, and it's very specific. So when I was thinking about patterns of behavior, and I looked at our history, saying, listen, for most of humanity, we've had to do physical labor, right? And so from being born as a child and from learning how to walk and run, then in my community, in the culture I lived in, I'd be a fisherman, I'd be a farmer, I'd be a warrior, and I would be moving every single day. So that innate ability to move, that core structure got pulled into a world where it made it stronger. And I had all these different dimensions I could work with it in. But it's the same thing with who we are personally, right? So when I'm born, and there's Dr. Lisa Miller. She's an incredible clinical psychologist and teacher at Columbia University. And so I came across some of her research, and this is, of course, years after I started on this path, and she confirmed what I believed to be true, is that we're born with a spiritual core. And if you look at history, you think about every culture, you think about the physical core, and every culture made you do physical labor every single day as a part of it. But if I grew up in Greek culture, for example, 2,000 years ago, when I woke up in the morning, there would be prayers and blessings around food and the greeting of the sun. There would be temples, there would be religious icons everywhere. There'd be a way of interacting with the world, but it was always through this spiritual lens, right? And you think about the trauma that people had gone through for all of humanity, because humans, we've done some terrible things to each other. We've always done terrible things to each other at some level. And so how do people survive? How do people survive, the challenges, not only the abuse, but just the challenges of living all through these challenging time in history? And we look at every single day, no matter what was going on in the world, no matter how challenging it was, I had a spiritual practice. And it was every single day, 7 days a week. I would come out and I would embrace my idea of God or goddesses or whatever my belief system was. and I would be able to stabilize myself emotionally and spiritually to these really profound ideas. And I really believe that's the way, you know, most of humanity made their way through these challenging thousands of years of our development. And now in the 20th century, we got rid of it. We decided, you know, somebody decided that these spiritual practices, it was all superstition, right? That caused all the problems. And so the Enlightenment era and, you know, the age of rationalization. And in the 20th century, when we kind of got rid of God, we got rid of that idea. We murdered 100 million people because we got rid of that notion. That's where we see the rise of communism and fascism come out of the, it's like the dark ages for humanity. So with that idea in mind, I looked at, okay, so what if I looked at the emotional core? What if character development was our emotional core? Maybe at the seat of who we are was the development of our character. And maybe what culture, our spiritual practices, and not so much religious, right? So, you know, spirituality and religion are not the same thing, but they can be combined, right? So it's really important people understand the difference between those two ideas. But the development of my spiritual core, when I, let's say, again, you don't have to go back so many years ago, and certainly in older countries, my spiritual core would be developed through ceremonies. So if I was 13 or 14 years old in different countries, there would be a coming of age ceremony, right, for boys and girls. So I would as my hormones were changing, as I was growing up and maturing, I'd be given a path to follow with a certain set of responsibilities. This is what it means to be a young woman in my culture. This is what it means to be a young man inside my culture. And regardless of, you know, I know that people often say, well, these cultures are very oppressive and they'll always find fault with it. But the idea being is that if I know the roles and responsibilities of me as a man, as a young man, then I have a burden of responsibility. I have something to strive for, not just for myself, but for my community, right? For my future wife, for my future kids, right? And so I have a role in my community, I have a role in the universe. I have responsibility for taking in air, regardless of what happened inside my life. And so I started taking that idea, that framework, right? Like the physical development of strength, I took the emotional and spiritual development of strength. And so again, the exact same way I would make somebody strong physically, I started working with people, and I'd say, listen, okay, I'll give you an example. One young gentleman, he came to me as a cocaine addict. He's been in and out of therapy 4 years. And still struggling, angry, very dark moods, you know, right? And so I imagine at some point in time, you know, suicide was a part of his thought process, which is actually very common. I had the conversation on suicide so often with so many people. It's such a common idea because, man, life gets tiring, so it's very understandable. But it was interesting. I sat down with him, and again, he's 4 years of just nothing but challenges. But he had a young daughter. He had a 3-month-old daughter, and he sat in front of me, and I said, "Listen, I can work with an addict, or I can work with a young man and a father. I'm not going to work with both. Choose a path." And again, like our old culture, which actually asks people to move forward, to accept the burden of responsibility, you know, this young man decided to choose the path of a father and a young man. And 3 months later, after 4 years of in and out of therapy and counseling, and 3 months later, he developed the maturity and the courage to be a man and a father. But it wasn't about all the problems he had. The problems he had became smaller because he became larger, stronger in character, took on more responsibility, took an active role in his community, took an active role inside of his world. And this is a 20-year-old male. And so we find routinely that the more that we work on our character, right? Or, you know, like if I have a physical injury, the more I work on my physical core. If I have a spiritual injury, the more I work on my emotional core, my character. As I become larger and stronger this way, my problems become smaller and smaller. And so quite often, when you look at typical talk therapy, quite often it spends an inordinate amount of time talking about the problem. And I get it. I mean, and I'm not saying talk therapy is not effective. Some people do exceptionally well with that. But I found for myself as a male, especially as a male who went through quite a bit of sexual abuse during that time on the street, I'm not going to talk about it. So you're not going to get that out of me, right? Because if I talk about it, I'm going to have to remind myself that it's true, that that really happened. And for males, that's a very hard thing to talk about, right? Because it's because you don't know what to do with it. There's so much revulsion. You don't know what to do with it. So I remember coming to a therapist clinic, therapist office for my $200 an hour, and I'm going, this is going to take forever because I'm not going to say what's in my head. Not at the level of, not at the level of the way, not at the level of truth as I believe it to be. I just don't have the ability to say it. So with the I Am project, what I discovered is that I could develop a process where people didn't actually have to talk about it. I could actually help them, I could get them to navigate inside their mind. And as we build their character, I could have them look at those old stories, and they themselves stronger in character, more courageous, right? More truthful to themselves. They could look at those old stories and they could reconcile them. They could actually close the story and decide what it meant, but only from a place of high character, only from a place of greater wisdom and understanding. And what's so beautiful is that as we go through the different parts of our life, when our physical wellness, our spiritual wellness, our relationships with our family, and perhaps in partnerships, even career, around money, like our minds are so fragmented. But I found that if I took their emotional core, their spiritual core, I could build their whole life to it. The same way a beautiful gymnast can is so strong and so agile and so powerful, and no matter where they are in space, they're always in their core. That's what makes them so amazing. And so the same thing with us emotionally and our spiritually. Once we learn how to build that emotional spiritual core, no matter where we are in the world, we are ourselves. We are the same person no matter where we find us. And that's something our culture used to do for us, but we've long since abandoned it. And I think that's a really huge problem. I think it's been very devastating for millions of people, because as imperfect as it was, right, as many problems as we always had as humans, that framework was necessary for giving us ability to overcome tragedy, because tragedy has always been a part of our story. It's always been a part of our story. So, and again, I think we sit down and we realize it and we look at it, and I would offer your viewers to think about this. Take a bit of time one day, maybe go through some cycles of breath, breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale on 4, and do it about 8 times. So you kind of bring your nervous system down. You take yourself from like a high beta brain to more of an alpha state, so you're a bit more calm. And then ask yourself a very simple question. Who do I need to become to have the life that I want? What 2 to 3 values, what 2 to 3 virtues, what 2 to 3 character strengths do I need to develop to have the life that I want? And it's not what do I have to do, because I haven't met anyone yet. And I've been in this particular practice of the I Am project in development over the last 15 years. I haven't met anyone that if I kind of cornered them and I said, what do you need to do? Most people have the answer. We know what we should be doing, but we're not, and we don't know why. So we're stuck in a contrast between I know better, I just can't seem to do better. And I don't know why. I don't know what's stopping me. And what's stopping us is all these memories, all these stories that have never been finished. And the ability to go down and close those stories and define, so, it wasn't my fault that this stuff happened. It was tragic and it was horrific, but it wasn't my fault. And so I had to get past the disgust. I had to get past the revulsion. I had to change the meaning of the story. And what's so extraordinary, and you're a good example of it, which is why you're in the work that you are, is that humans, we can do hard things. We can do hard things. We're designed for. Like, we are extraordinarily powerful if we allow ourselves to be. And it's not a matter of telling everybody your story. You don't have to, bare your soul to the entire world. It's not what it means. But it does mean that inside of you, that there's so much more power and so much more strength and courage if you're just willing to open it up. And I referred to Dr. Lisa Miller again, who just her book was called The Awakened Brain, and extraordinary research. But she said something powerfully. She said that depression, like deep depression and spirituality, is on different sides of the same coin. And in order to, it's almost like in order to have a breakthrough, you need a breakdown. Right? Sometimes you got to get taken to your knees before you're able to rise and take your life on, right? To really do something powerful with your life. And that seems to be the message in all old spiritual ideas, right? Suffering is a part of the journey. It's not the only part of the journey, but it's certainly a part of the process. And but like I said, we can do hard things. And the I Am Project was just a way of looking at the rituals of our past and the reason why they were so powerful, and finding a way to simplify the journey so that all of us can have our own personal spiritual path. But we need to be on one. You know, I think there's no questioning of it. And personal development, the way it's designed in the world, I find personal development kind of fractures people. It's a bit fragmented. Because first of all, personal development is just about me. And my life is just not about me. I have children, I have grandchildren, I have clients, I have friends, I have neighbors. And so I think at the end of it, if you look at the ability to be strong, the ability to have power, it's when you do things, you know, not only for you, but for the greater good. And so when I look at my journey and I look at what I have struggled through and the obstacles along the way, the only reason I didn't step off the planet, the only reason I didn't just say, I'm done, this is just enough, is that I knew it wouldn't last forever. And I knew if I could lean into my struggle long enough, that would break. Eventually, you know, I would find a way through. And here's what I did for myself. I said, 90 days. I'll give myself 90 more days. And if things aren't better, I'm out of here. Right? And I did that for almost a decade, 90 days. I just kept forestalling it. I didn't want to die, but I wasn't very happy. But 90 days, 90 days. And I did it over and over and over again. And incrementally, I got a little bit better, a little bit smarter, because I knew I was being led to something. And it's been extraordinary to realize that the answers that we wanted, we were born with. If we want to do physically better to overcome our physical injury or physical limitations, we need to spend 80% of our time developing our physical core, right? It really does resolve so much. If we want to resolve the challenges, the trauma, and just some of the horrific things so many of us experience, we spend 80% of our time working on our character, our spiritual core. And it allows us to access the wisdom that's innate and built inside of all of us. More importantly, it attracts to us things that will move us forward on the next stage of our journey. But we have to go first, not as a victim, but as a victor. And it's always about, you know, the strength of character. And so again, I'll leave you with this question again. Who do you need to become to have the life that you want? What are the 2 to 3 values, the 2 to 3 character traits, or 2 to 3 virtues that if you practice, you really declared, you understood what they're for, you know what they felt, you embodied them, what would they be? And if that became your prayer, your meditation, your practice, just those 2 to 3 things, you'll find in a short period of time that your head becomes quieter, your path becomes more certain, and the pain begins to go away. Like I said, we are built to do hard things.
Exactly. And it's like we have an inner healer inside us, the wisdom. And there's one thing we need to do is just accept the journey, release the hurt, and move on. That's it. We shouldn't, you know, stay stuck, because we didn't come here to be stuck. We're here to experience life and move forward and evolve and transform. I want to ask you something, David. If you had a chance, an opportunity, or whatever, what would you want to change in this world? If yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. I think what comes to mind is that I want to help people. I want to help people go home. I think we're missing our home, right? Like we're missing the ability to feel at peace. And there's a beautiful, we live in such an amazing universe, and there's so much more power and beauty around it. I just want to show people it's possible to go home, that you can actually feel at home in your own body. You can feel at home inside your relationships. You can feel at home inside the community. And I think that's what we're missing. We feel like we've been abandoned and we're drifting aimlessly. But really, I think I want to show people how they can really go home and feel like they're there. And and home is back in their spiritual core. The way we were born into the world, and just returning people back to that understanding, that peace, because it makes the journey so much simpler.
So it's safe to come back home to you. It's really safe, isn't it?
Yes, yes,
It
yes,
is.
yes, exactly.
Say it, David. Tell the people here. It's safe.
Yeah, yes, it's safe to be inside your head. It's safe to be inside your heart. It's safe to be inside your body.
Exactly.
Right.
And with the
Really,
I Am project, you can help them out, do that. Be safe
absolutely.
and great. Do you have any future plans, David, you want to share to our viewers?
Well,
Anything new you're doing except the one you're doing now?
yeah, it's. I think it's just an expansion of this. I'm looking at the I Am project, because the I Am project, the structure of it, it's the basis of most spiritual structure. I mean, that's really where it comes from. And I'm looking at being able to take this program and put it underneath Judeo-Christian ideas. I can put it underneath Islamic ideas. I can put it underneath the Vedic scriptures. I just want to give people a framework so that whatever spiritual path that they're on, they can really look at it in a really a beautiful, almost like an architectural framework. So it's not so bit and piece. It's not so abstract. And because whatever faith you align to, whatever you believe, there's a way of being much more powerfully aligned to that faith. And I think I found the neurological structure. I think I found the structure that it was originally designed on. And so what I'm looking for is to carry it forward. And I want to connect with people who want to be a part of this journey. I brought this idea forward. By no means is it my idea, right? I'm the analyst of spirituality, right? I was able to see something that was already pre-existing, and I'm just looking to take it forward. I'm looking for. I'm currently writing a book on this process, and wanting to be able to develop masterminds inside these conversations, and also looking for partnerships along the way. Again, the things that I'm very good at when it comes to this type of work, and of course, there's things that I'm not so great at. And so, if I can finding the groups of the right-minded people to collaborate, to pull the message forward, so we can have these conversations. And I'm not so arrogant to think that, again, it's all mine. I know that I got here through the help and the wisdom of a lot of other people, and I would say even a bit of a divine intervention. And to go forward, the only way I'm going to go forward is through that same process, through the help and support of other people, and through a lot more divine intervention. So the I Am Project, I think, could be a powerful catalyst to really heal and solve a lot of problems by just exposing what is already inside of us.
Exactly. And it's good to expand. And you have my support, anything to do with childhood trauma in adults and ancestral wounds, because trauma is part of generational wounds, and maybe our parents were traumatized and we were affected by them. And we need to expand. Your project is really good, and you have my support for partnership or anything. I'm here for you. And as
You said something. You said something really important, and I don't want to drag this. I don't want to carry this on. I know we have only so much time, but you said something that's only 50% of the equation. We understand, and we seem to believe and understand, and the truth that there's intergenerational trauma.
Yeah.
But is there not intergenerational goodness? Is there not intergenerational spirituality? Most of my life, I wasn't being harmed. Some of my life, I was being harmed. So what was happening in my life when bad things were happening? I think we need to remember that most of life is okay. Some of it, just some of it, was kind of mired in trauma. if we believe that trauma can be intergenerational, then we must be able to believe that goodness and spirituality also is intergenerational. And that should be the journey we were on. That's what we should be looking for, rather than exaggerating the trauma, and which is all very true, but instead of exaggerating, saying this is true, but this is also true, and this is much more powerful. And I think that's the journey that most of us, more of us, need to be on, is the exploration of yes, but what else?
You know, people focus more on the hurt, and they don't focus on let's release this hurt and move on. It's like they feel like shameful of it, or maybe they just have to turn it around, and that's it. It's easy.
Well, yeah. Well, again, like I said, I think our spiritual practices of our history did that for us naturally, right? Because if you're a Jew, you would be praying 3 times a day. If you're a Muslim faith, you're probably praying 5 times a day. What would that be like 7 days a week if I was traumatized on Tuesday and I prayed Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm in the synagogue or I'm in the temple. And if I had all that time to interact with my higher self and spirituality, wouldn't that minimize the trauma? Wouldn't that find a way to reconcile it very quickly? And I think, regardless of what people think about religion or those practices, I think that practice, I think the ability to have a daily spiritual practice, I think is a really key missing element. And we just need to find out what that means for us. How do I make that inside my own life? Again, I just want people to go home. I just want people safe to go home. But at home, you have to be humble enough to realize that there's natural spiritual laws. And my whole career has been trying to discover and uncover what are those natural spiritual laws. Because when we align to them, our life becomes so much better.
Exactly. And praying, meditation, breathing, all this is perfect for healing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then these are going to help us come back home.
Yeah, we've done it for thousands of years. Our ancestors vetted the process. There's a reason why it started. There's a reason why it continued. And you look at all the scientific literature, right? Neuropsychology. You look at just the benefits of meditation and prayer and spiritual beliefs. It's just extraordinary, right? So, yeah. Anyhow, sorry, I know I went over time, but this conversation could go on forever.
Yeah, it could take lots of hours. Okay, let's have the closing message statement.
Well, again, it's just, I think I'll just reiterate, we are designed to do hard things, right? And it's, and a little quote from Man's Search for Meaning from Viktor Frankl. He said, instead of actually having the mindset of, what do I want from the world? What do I want? What does the world want from me? What am I being called to do? Because sometimes I think if you can find meaning in your misery, then you would gladly walk through that path again. I think all of us that are doing this work would say, if I had to go through it all over again, all the ugliness, all the terrible things I experienced, if I had to go through all again just so I could be here today having this conversation, I would. Right. So that means that if you're in the middle of the struggle, something beautiful and powerful is waiting for you if you're just willing to let it in.
Exactly. Or a good question to ask is who I want to serve, or if you're more spiritual, you can ask God, like, who am I going to be serving? Show me the way. And the answers, then the signs will come in. It's just, we have to believe that.
Yeah, that's true.
So thank you, David. This was a very interesting conversation. And thank you to our viewers for being here with us. See you in the next edition. Thank you very much.